phrase we're going to hear today about being brought underneath the wings of the Lord. God protects us and sees after us in that way. So Anywhere with Jesus is a good song about how the Lord is with us in a protective sort of way. Remember that Ruth is from Moab, but she's in Judah with her mother-in-law Naomi. So she's made the journey, she's made the trip, and she said about accompanying Naomi to Bethlehem, where they're going to live, where you go, I will go, where you lodge, I will lodge. And so it's not just Ruth and Naomi, but the Lord is traveling with them as well and giving protection to them and to us. So let's do Anywhere with Jesus, I Can Safely Go, and we'll be doing the first two verses. 414. Anywhere with Jesus I can safely go, anywhere he leads me in this world below, anywhere without him dearest joys would fade, anywhere with Jesus I am not afraid, anywhere, fear I cannot know, anywhere with Jesus I can safely go, anywhere I am not alone. Other friends may fail me, he is still my own. Though his hand may lead me over dreariest ways, anywhere with Jesus is a house of praise. Anywhere, fear I cannot know. Anywhere with Jesus I can safely go. So we are in Ruth, chapter 2. Again, if you want a schedule, John's back there in the back. Raise your hand, he'll give you one. We are doing verses 1 through 16. So we call it Ruth by text and by topic. There's so many wonderful topics in the book of Ruth that get introduced by the text. The text itself is a straightforward story, so doing the text part doesn't really take a long time. We just advance the story every week. But as we advance the story, we have all of these topics that come up that are relevant to us still today. As a matter of fact, since we're looking at it and you got your schedule there, here are some topics that we'll be looking at today. And this schedule says we're doing February 1, we're not doing February 8 because we got snowed out one Sunday, so we're a week behind. So we're doing February 1 today. And the topics are worthiness, reputation, both Boaz and Ruth, their reputations are noticed, necessities, that has to do with the protection we were talking about, the provision of the Lord, him being with us and taking care of us. Ruth and Naomi were empty, but God took care of their necessities. The phrase happened to come, providence, is a big topic in the book of Ruth. And then the boss, because Boaz is a boss, but he is a boss who does have compassion and some camaraderie with those who are the laborers who work under his supervision. And so we'll talk about that. The phrase, who is this? The book of Ruth is a story. Ruth has a story. Boaz has a life story. Naomi has a life story. And their life stories flow into the story of King David and eventually the Lord Jesus. So when you think about the little simple phrase, who is this? It's not just asking about a name, but we have a story in our life that we're working out. And then there's work ethic, because Ruth does go to work. There's the next word is the protection word that we've already talked about, and being under God's wing. And then kind speech. There's a lot of, if you notice going through our text today, there's a lot of he said, she said, they said, and all of it is speech that is seasoned with salt, to use a Bible phrase. People speak kindly of one another and to one another in the book of Ruth. Social equity, because we do have a boss, and we have laborers, and we have a migrant Moab girl. But there is, within the framework of the Lord, there is some social equity that is observed towards one another. And then benevolence is a big thing, because here's Ruth and Naomi, and they are having to rely on the kindness of their neighbors in order to get a start, having come back empty from Moab. Naomi is looking to reestablish life, and there is a benevolent system in place that's helpful for that. So we have a lot of topics to cover today, but let's start with the text. Just read through the text and notice a couple of things as we go. Ruth chapter 2, verses 1 through 16. Now, Naomi, we're going to stop right there. This book is called the book of Ruth, but in the reading of the story, as we read through the story really seems to center around Naomi. When we begin the story, it's Naomi and her husband Elimelech and their two boys that, because of famine in Bethlehem of Judah, make a move to Moab. And at that point, Ruth is not even part of the picture. Ruth is one of the girls, is a Moabite girl that one of the boys will marry. So Naomi is right there in the very beginning of the story. And then, when we get to the end of the book of Ruth, we can jump to the end. When we get to the end of the book of Ruth, it ends with Naomi holding a baby on her lap. So Naomi is really it's her story, but Ruth is quite the heroine within this story as well. So we have in chapter 2 now Naomi, because it's still about Naomi and her situation. Now Naomi had a relative of her husband's. A relative there, we understand, is quite a flexible word, kinsman, and it is going to play into the story that this person that's talked about, this kinsman, is Boaz, but he is and it is mentioned here that he's a worthy man. Your Bible might say wealthy in that place. Some translations say a wealthy person, but some translations say a worthy person. And it is just a word that means a person of great substance. So it could be wealth, but you can be a person of great substance in other ways too. So we're going to talk about that when we get to that topic of worthiness. But this relative of her husband is a worthy man of the clan of Elimelech, which would put him in Elimelech's circle. I'm going to have to decide whether I'm going to say Elimelech or Elimelech. I go back and forth on those. But if you'll remember chapter 1 and verse 2, Elimelech and the name of his wife Naomi that were Ephrathites from Bethlehem. So perhaps when it says that Boaz is of the clan of Elimelech, then perhaps he's a Ephraimite as well, but a citizen of Bethlehem. So Naomi had a relative of her husband, a worthy man of the clan of Elimelech, whose name was Boaz. And that relative part's going to play a really, really big part in the story here. And Ruth the Moabite. Now, one of the things that the storyteller, the Holy Spirit, does not let us forget is that Ruth is a foreigner. She's an alien. She's a migrant. She's in Judah, but she doesn't belong. She's an outsider. And so frequently, when you read her name, it has this descriptor that is attached to remind us that she's not a Jew. She's a Moab. She's from Moab. She's a Moabitess. She doesn't belong here. So Ruth the Moabite said to Naomi, "Let me go to the field and glean among the ears of grain after him in whose sight I shall find favor." I think we should read that as, of course, she's going to end up in the field of Boaz. That's the story where we're going. But when she sets out on this morning, she doesn't know whose field she's going to end up with. She's going to use the benevolence system, and we'll talk about that, to gather some food from among crops that are not hers, and in order to and even though that's a part of the law, that farmers, agricultural people are supposed to allow that as a benevolent system for the poor, you can imagine that sometimes, not in cooperation with the law, people who own the land make it difficult on the poor people who show up and are mean to them, run them off. So she's going to go out, and she's not only, it would be one thing if she were a poor Jewish girl. She's a Moabite. But I'm going to go and try to glean in some field somewhere, and I'll have to land in some place where somebody shows some kindness to me, some favor. So that's where she's headed. And Naomi says to her, "Go, my daughter." And isn't that nice? Because Naomi has this Moabitess for a daughter-in-law, and although there have been kindnesses exchanged, this is a nice term for Naomi to refer to her as her daughter, with the commitment that Ruth made with those beautiful words, "Where you go, I'll go. Where you lodge, I'll lodge. Your God will be my God. Your people will be my people." Then Ruth has become the surviving daughter of Naomi. In verse 3, "So she set out and went and gleaned in the field after the reapers. And she happened to come to the part of the field belonging to Boaz, who was of the clan of Elimelech. And behold, Boaz came from Bethlehem." We're going to talk some today. Sometimes our topics overlap. Providence is in nearly every paragraph of the book of Ruth. And we have two expressions here. One phrase is, she's looking for someone, hoping to land, hoping to find a place amongst a person who owns a farm who will show her some favor. And it happened that she came to the field of Boaz. But there is more than happenstance and luck that's involved in that. And even using that phrase, it's used in sort of an ironic sense that the Lord's hand is in here. And then it's not only that she chose the field of Boaz. Boaz is the owner. He lives in Bethlehem. This farm apparently is somewhere outside of Bethlehem. And we are not to suppose that Boaz goes out there every day. But behold, Boaz came that day. So again, the providence of God is at work. "And he said to the reapers," when Boaz got there, "The Lord be with you." And they answered, "The Lord bless you." Isn't it nice that we have these kind word exchanges? And we see where the kindness comes from. These phrases are within the common conversation and greetings of Jewish people, but they do indicate a kindness, and the place where that comes from, Jehovah. And so we'll be talking about that as well. Boss and employee have this good relationship. Then, this in verse 5 now, then Boaz said to his young man who was in charge of the reapers, his supervisor, whose young woman is this? Or as we put it in the topics, who is this? So Boaz sees Ruth, and his question to his supervising reaper, this obviously, this reaper has kept up with who's in the field. And as Boaz comes, why does he ask the question, who is this? Could be several reasons. It could be that it's a small town and people pretty much know each other, and especially around these gleaning times, the poor people who might show up. But here's a face Boaz doesn't recognize. He doesn't know who this person is. So it could be that. Or it could be, there's an attractive lady. So who's that? So, maybe it's that. So there could be a couple of things going on with that. And the servant who was in charge of the reapers answered, she is the young Moabite. That's always going to be attached to her name and her story. She's the young Moabite woman who came back with Naomi from the country of Moab. She said, please let me glean and gather among the sheaves after the reapers. So she came and has continued from early morning until now, except for a short rest. So as the story is advancing, the initial reading, especially in the ESV that I read, and most of our translations communicate that Ruth didn't just find a field and start picking grain. She went to the person who looked like he was in charge and checked in or asked permission, gained favor, as she would put it, perhaps. And so she let them know who she was and why it was that she was there. So the supervisor knows who she is and her story, so he can relate that to Boaz. But, and I told Patty, when I was looking into this lesson, I told Patty, I don't think I'm going to mention this, but I think I will mention it. There are some translations that have this story going a little bit different from this first reading. It sounds like Ruth got there, she started gleaning in the field, and maybe the supervisor went over and said, if you're going to be here, I need to know who you are. But anyway, they had exchanged stories. But it does sound like with the supervisor's words that so she came and has continued from early morning until now, except for a short rest. I have a note in my Bible, maybe you have one in yours, that says down at the bottom of the page in my Bible about that phrase, except for a short rest. It says, compare the Vulgate. The meaning of the Hebrew phrase is uncertain. And so we can at least consider this about Ruth, and perhaps this is what happened. Ruth had perhaps already been to a field or two where she didn't find favor, where people treated her ill. And perhaps in among the field laborers, she might have received some sort of harassment because maybe just because she was female or because she was a Moabite female. So she might have run into a few places where she didn't find favor and she moved on. And so she comes to this field and she does ask permission to glean. But here's a suggestion that some people make, and that is when she says, please let me gather the sheaves, some translations say among the reapers. And so some suggest that she was asking for a special favor. I've been out this morning, I've been trying to glean, I've been run off, I've been harassed, people have bothered me. So would it be okay if I gathered among the reapers rather than among some of the other people, maybe some ne'er-do-wells who were there using the benevolent system to gather? And perhaps then it's suggested that this report's going on from this supervisor to Boaz because he didn't immediately give her the permission to do that. But what he says, instead of saying she continued from early morning until now except for a short rest, some translations say she's been here all morning around the house. So it could be, just saying that to suggest, that Ruth could be asking for some special favor for her own safety that even the young supervisor wouldn't give her, but that if Boaz, who owns it, if he wants to give her that. And actually, one reason I want to go ahead and say that's a possibility is because when we read the next little bit about what Boaz tells her, it seems to be an affirmation to the kind of thing she perhaps has been asking for. So it doesn't make a big difference, but it does, we want to consider these aspects of the story. So in verse 8 then, Boaz said to Ruth, now listen, my daughter, do not go to glean in another field or leave this one, but keep close to my young women. Let your eyes be on the field that they are reaping and go after them. So he does seem to put her in, maybe at her request. He could have initiated it in one way we look at the story. She could have asked for that favor in another way, and he responds positively to it. But also, he says, have I not charged the young men not to touch you? So I'm going to make this a safe environment for you, and I will put out the word. You're not to be harassed or bothered or molested in any way. And when you are thirsty, go to the vessels and drink what the young men have drawn. That would save time. It was a process to draw water and to drink it. So drink the water that was intended for the worker, not for the poor people who showed up to voluntarily glean the corners, but take the place of one of my laborers and the arrangements that go for that. And so in verse 10, then she fell on her face, bowing to the ground, acts of humility, and said to him, why have I found favor in your eyes that you should take notice of me since I am a foreigner? There's that Moabite thing again. And if Ruth had already tried some spots where she didn't find favor, this would make this an especially happy moment for her, that she's found someone and a place that would not only have her in the field gleaning, but doing so in a safe and efficient way. And she recognizes this is out of the ordinary. I'm a foreigner who's come. I'm not even a poor person of the town that you might not resent helping. I'm a foreigner who showed up here. But Boaz answered her, all that you have done for your mother-in-law since the death of your husband has been fully told to me, and how you left your father and mother and your native land and came to a people that you did not know before. The Lord repay you for what you've done, and a full reward be given you by the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to take refuge. So Ruth does, so he's gotten the full story on Ruth and the reputation that she's already established with sticking with Naomi has come to the attention and appreciation of Boaz. And so then, verse 13, and she said, I have found favor in your eyes, my Lord, for you have comforted me and spoken kindly to your servant, though I'm not one of your servants. You're treating me as one of your paid staff, although I don't belong there. And in verse 14, and at mealtime, Boaz said to her, come here and eat some bread and dip your morsel in the wine. So she sat beside the reapers, and he passed to her roasted grain, and she ate until she was satisfied, and she had some left over. When she rose to glean, Boaz instructed his young men, saying, let her glean even among the sheaves, and do not reproach her. And also pull out some of the bundles for her, and leave it for her to glean, and do not rebuke her. So come mealtime, he's already shown her some favor. Come mealtime, he sits her with the rest of the people and the prepared lunch for the workers. He passed to her some roasted grain, and not just a little bit, but enough that she had some left over. You know, isn't that convenient? When y'all go out to eat, do some of y'all cut your hamburger in half and save half of it till later? You know, that kind of thing. It's nice to have later. So Ruth is having her needs supplied, and in a happy way with her in doing that. And also, Boaz makes things as easy on her as possible by having her to be able to glean among the reapers. And he says, and even pull out some bundles and leave them. So here's what I understand. Not that I'm in the farming business, but you can read this kind of stuff. Here we are at the barley harvest. And the way that it was done with laborers in the field, there were several different laborers with different jobs, different roles. So some would go through the fields and either pull up the barley from the roots, or they would have a sickle and they would cut it right at ground length. And then that being done, they would leave that. So others would come behind them and pick up the sheaves that had been cut or pulled up. And their job was to gather them up and put them in bundles, bundle them up. And then perhaps they, or maybe a third job, somebody would pick up the bundles and take them to the cart. Then that would be taken to wherever they were going to go. And they used all parts of the barley. There was the grain. Some of it was taken to be made into flour for bread. Some of it was used to feed animals. The stalks themselves were used sometimes to make bedding and that kind of thing. Or if there was some building going on, they would use the stalks to bind the mud out of which they made their homes and made their brick that way. So it was all put to good use. So apparently what Boaz does when he says, and so we have these bundles, leave them when they're already, because it was hard to pull them up and to cut them. So leave a few of those on the ground for her so it becomes easy for her. So all of this, here's our text. And there's just a lot of good stuff going on in there. Let's go back and do a few topics. So the first topic we're going to look at is worthiness, because in chapter 2 and verse 1, Naomi had a relative of her husband's, a worthy man of the clan of Elimelech. As I mentioned going through the text, this worthy has to do with a person of substance. So some of our Bibles say wealth. He would be a wealthy man, but as we mentioned, you can be a person of substance in other ways. And Boaz does show himself to be a worthy person in relation to his workers and the way that he talks to them, to the poor that are in his fields, to even the Moabitess, who requires, because she is a foreigner, requires some special attention. And given that he knows Naomi and the difficulties of Naomi, he appreciates that Ruth is there. So he acts worthily in everything that he does. But I do want to point to a few things. I'm turning a page in my Bible from chapter 2 and verse 1, Elimelech, a worthy man, to chapter 3 and verse 11. So a little while later, and now, my daughter, this is chapter 3 and verse 11, I will do for you all that you ask, for all my townsmen know that you are a worthy woman. So Boaz is a worthy man, he says to her, you are a worthy woman. And by the way, this worthy woman thing, Proverbs chapter 31, the woman of great worth, that's the same word. And so she is highly esteemed by Boaz, but not only by Boaz, but he said, people see your story and they've heard what you've done in relation to Naomi. You're a woman of worthiness and substance. And then, one more time, chapter 4, and also verse 11, when the story advances to that area, and Boaz and Ruth are before the elders at the gate. Chapter 4 and verse 11, then all the people who were at the gate and the elders said, we are witnesses. May the Lord make the woman who's coming into your house like Rachel and Leah, who together built up the house of Israel. May you act worthily, is the translation my Bible has. May you act worthily in Ephrathah. They are Ephrathites of Bethlehem, and be renowned in Bethlehem. So as a couple, we have Boaz, he's a worthy man. Ruth, she's a worthy woman. And together they are a worthy family, a worthy couple. And we can have some appreciation of that and also give attention to our own reputation of worthiness. Reputation is our next topic that we talk about. Kindness does breed kindness. A harsh word stirs up anger, but kind words de-escalate and even breed further kind words. So we want to be worthy people of kindness, of good conversation. Boaz notes the kindness that Ruth has shown to Naomi by accompanying her. Naomi would be left a widow woman with no means of support whatsoever if Ruth hadn't been there. So we have this kindness that's going around, and it's establishing a reputation. Boaz demonstrates that his reputation is one of kindness and care for those who work for him, and the people like Ruth that he meets. She has a reputation already of sacrifice, self-sacrifice, selflessness, concern for her mother-in-law, sticking with the family. So we in our own lives, we want to remember as we meet people that first impressions are a big deal. And whatever impression that we make on someone at the beginning is one that it's difficult to erase. So we want to do that individually. We also want to do that as a church, being a welcoming and kind, conversational church. We want to we do go to some pains to make a good impression, and for the church to do that, that means we have to individually do that some together, and all of you can help in that as you look for opportunities to show kindness to people you don't know. Boaz, who's this woman? Well, it's this woman Ruth. Here's her story. He shows kindness, and so that's important for all of us. And then there's the topic of necessities. Ruth is going out to glean the fields because she and Naomi don't have anything to eat. They don't have any money to buy something to eat. And so they don't have the common necessities that a lot of people take for granted. But they had to go out and seek and hope for some good favor from someone that they might receive that. And they do Ruth finds that favor, but she finds the favor not just from Boaz, but Boaz says, the favor that you have found comes from the Lord, under whose wings you have come. And so the Lord does provide our necessities. And of course, that brings certain freedoms that we're told in the New Testament. Seek first the kingdom of God, and all the necessities will be added to you. So let's remember that admonition. And then there's the phrase, by the way, I like that phrase, she set out. You know, so you have to, if you're going to accomplish something, you have to get up in the morning and set out to do it. So, and she didn't know what the day held. She didn't know if she would find any favor. She didn't know if she'd be run off or if she would come back at the end of the day with enough food to feed them for the day and the next. But she set out. She's going to find what she finds. And so she happened to come. We talked about that phrase as we went through the text. She happened to come. And then in verse 4, and behold, then Boaz on that day and at that hour came. So God's hand is in here. And we do, when things of favor, events of favor occur to us, and we think, well, wasn't that lucky? We might want to think a little bit deeper about, this happened today. We might want to think a little bit deeper about that. And then here is Boaz greeting his workers. The Lord be with you. They answer, the Lord bless you. So there are these kind, maybe common, but at the same time, not everyone observes greetings and kindness, and not everyone even means what they say about those things. Every once in a while, somebody will say, hey, Cecil, how are you? And I'll say, well, is that just a greeting or you really want to know? So, because, depending on what the day is held. So it does seem that Boaz has this good relationship with his work, and he really is wishing them the Lord's favor. And they do wish the Lord's blessing upon this man who's been kind to them. And Boaz is practicing Ephesians chapter 6 and verse 9. Ephesians 6 and verse 9 is addressed to the bosses, to the supervisors, to the employers, to the owners. For those who have people working under them, be kind, treat well, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. If your places were switched, how would you like for your supervisor, your boss to treat you? Because there's a reason, Ephesians 6:9 says. However high up the ladder we are, whatever link in the chain we are in the status and order, Paul said in Ephesians 6:9 to the bosses and the supervisors and the owners, remember there's somebody above you. You're not the last rung on the ladder. You're not the last link in the chain. So remember there's someone who is above you, and he, the Lord God, does not do things with partiality. He's going to treat you just like he treats the person you employ or the person below you, and he's going to regard them as highly as he regards you, and he's going to regard you like he regards them. And a lot of it has to do with the golden rule and treating one another as you would like to be treated. And then there is the who is this question that Boaz asked, and a reminder that we do have a story that we're living. We do have a name, and sometimes when somebody says, who are you? We just give them our name. But we don't just have a name, we have a story. And Boaz was moved to the favor that he showed because he didn't just know Ruth's name. He was made aware of her story and what was going on with her. So who is this? And what is our story? And going back to our first topic, is it a worthy story? And then there is work ethic. We've already mentioned that Ruth set out and to go to work early in the morning. She went to fields to harvest do the difficult harvesting of the corners and going behind the pickers who had already picked it over. But just like Boaz is practicing Ephesians 6:9 regarding his workers, Ruth is practicing 2 Thessalonians 3 and verse 10, which is we should not be idle, but if we want to eat, then we also should be willing to work. And so Ruth does that. We have that topic in here for us. And then there is the protection, how all this works, the protection coming under the wings of God. That phrase is spoken by Boaz in chapter 2 and verse 12. May a full reward be given you by the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to take refuge. We remember that Ruth's story was a conversion story. She told Naomi, my God will be your God. So she has come to Jehovah for him as God, as the one she would worship and look to for blessing and protection. And so may you be given full reward by the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you take refuge. And even though we have just a couple of minutes, I don't want to skip these. So just listen to a couple of verses. Psalm chapter 17, Psalm number 17. Verse 8. Keep me, speaking to the Lord, keep me as the apple of your eye. Hide me in the shadow of your wings from the wicked who do me violence. Ruth might have been scared of that day. But hide me in the shadow of your wings. Another psalm, Psalm number 36. And here are verses 7 and 8. Oh, how precious is your steadfast love, O God. The children of mankind take refuge in the shadow of your wings. They feast on the abundance of your house, and you give them drink from the river of your delights. Boaz gave her roasted grain. He said, get your water from among the workers. And so those things worked well. The bell is rung. A few more topics we didn't get to, but you've gotten the gist of what's going on in the story and the worthy story of worthy Boaz, worthy Ruth, and the Lord who blesses them and takes them under his wing to see that they are taken care of. So we'll pick up next week then with the rest of chapter 2. This is just a schedule paper, but they're up here on the front pew if you'd like one.